Imagine a scenario where Canada, the land of vast forests and peaceful dairy farms, is forced to kneel before the overwhelming economic power of its southern neighbor. With President Donald Trump's recent tariff moves, a 25% duty on most Canadian goods and a looming threat of a 250% tariff on lumber and dairy products, the question is no longer whether this trade war will escalate, but rather how long Canada can hold out before conceding. Amid growing trade tensions between these two historically close allies, D2 Global News takes a deep dive into Canada's economic dependence on the U.S., the potential damage from these tariffs, and the possibility that Ottawa may have to surrender to avoid a full-scale economic crisis. The trade relationship between Canada and the U.S., once seen as a model of North American cooperation, is now on shaky ground. On March 4, 2025, President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods, excluding energy, which faces a 10% tariff. Just 3 days later, on March 7, he threatened a staggering 250% tariff on Canadian lumber and dairy products, a move widely perceived as direct retaliation against Canada's supply management system, which imposes out-of-quota tariffs of up to 250% to protect domestic farmers. The conflict centers around two key industries, dairy and lumber. In the dairy sector, Canada stands accused by the U.S. of failing to comply with USMCA import quotas, sparking outrage among American dairy producers. The International Dairy Foods Association, IDFA, has criticized Canada's protectionist policies, arguing that they harm U.S. interests. Meanwhile, Canada's softwood lumber industry, already facing a 14.5% tariff from the U.S. due to alleged illegal subsidies, now risks a tariff increase of up to 17 times its current rate, which could skyrocket construction costs in the U.S. and further deepen bilateral tensions. Canada is an open economy, where international trade serves as a primary growth driver. According to the United States Trade Representative, in 2023, Canada exported a total of $587 billion, of which 66% amounting to $387 billion, flowed into the U.S. market. In contrast, the U.S. exported only $294 billion worth of goods to Canada, accounting for a mere 11.7% of its total exports. This imbalance is not just a number, it is a stark reality. Canada needs the U.S. far more than the U.S. needs Canada. Canada's top exports to the U.S. include vehicles and parts, $107 billion, mineral fuels, $102 billion, electrical machinery, $29 billion, lumber, $14 billion, and dairy, $200 million. With two-thirds of Canadian goods destined for the U.S., any trade barrier imposed by Washington could trigger a domino effect, threatening millions of jobs in key industries across Canada. The consequences of these tariffs are not merely theoretical, they have been quantified. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the 25% U.S. tariff could shrink Canada's GDP by 2.6%, equating to a loss of $78 billion, with every Canadian losing approximately $1.900 annually if the trade war escalates. The Bank of Canada has also warned that these measures would disrupt supply chains, drive inflation higher, and harm long-term economic growth. If the proposed 250% tariff on lumber and dairy is implemented, the situation will be even more catastrophic. Canada's lumber industry, which exports $10 billion worth of products to the U.S., could collapse under the strain, leading to mass job losses in provinces such as British Columbia and Quebec. The dairy sector, though exporting only $200 million, would also suffer severe consequences, weakening the supply management system that Canada has built to protect its domestic farmers. Canada is not without options to retaliate. Ottawa could impose counter-tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting industries such as dairy. The U.S. exports $1.2 billion to Canada, or energy. However, with a GDP of only $2.1 trillion compared to the U.S.'s massive $27.5 trillion, Canada lacks the leverage to inflict significant damage. The U.S., with its superior market diversification capabilities, can easily redirect its exports elsewhere, whereas Canada would struggle to find a short-term alternative to its largest trading partner. According to IDFA analysis, another potential response would be to restrict resource exports, such as oil and gas, to the U.S. However, This strategy is fraught with risks. The U.S. has ramped up domestic production and could source energy from other countries like Saudi Arabia or Mexico, reducing the effectiveness of Canada's energy weapon. Aligning with the EU is an attractive idea, but negotiations would take years and would not provide an immediate solution to the crisis. The U.S. has laid out clear demands. Canada must expand dairy import quotas under USMCA, lower out-of-quota tariffs, and address the softwood lumber dispute. Conversely, Canada wants to protect its dairy farmers and denies allegations of illegal lumber subsidies. But as economic pressure mounts, Ottawa may have no choice but to concede. Potential scenarios include increasing dairy import quotas, adjusting tariffs, or renegotiating lumber policies to appease Washington. This may not be an ideal victory for Canada, but it could be the only way to mitigate long-term economic damage. With its heavy economic reliance on the U.S. and the massive costs of a prolonged trade war, Canada appears to be at an inescapable crossroads. The U.S., with its sheer economic scale and greater resilience, holds the dominant position, while Canada may attempt to hold out. The price of stubbornness, economic recession, job losses, and inflation could prove too steep to bear. Ultimately, to safeguard its economy, Canada will likely have to surrender, accepting U.S. demands in the dairy and lumber sectors. This is not a failure of Canadian resilience but rather a recognition of reality in global trade. Size and leverage are the deciding factors. The real question is whether Canada can turn this concession into an opportunity to restructure its economy and reduce its dependence on the U.S. in the future. That is the challenge Ottawa must address in the challenging days ahead. Thank you for watching the video. What are your thoughts on this issue? Share your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with our latest content. Farewell and see you next time.